And we're back, folks, here on WWE Network and Chill, where every single week I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the latest episode of WWE 24, focusing on Trish Stratus. This aired on Sunday night after Starrcade. Did not get a chance to watch it live, partly because the network stream already wasn't working anyway. I tried watching the show, no joke, like a dozen times on my Roku TV, on my laptop. Nothing was working. And I know based off my Twitter feed, I was far from the only one. I was not the only person having issues with the network on Sunday. So at a certain point, I just gave up and I saw they were airing it on their YouTube channel instead, which was cool, so I did that. But I was so pissed off with the network, I was like, fuck it, I'm not going to even bother watching the Trish Stratus documentary right now. So I watched it today instead, on Monday morning. So had I watched it last night, this review would probably be up a lot earlier than it is, so I apologize for that in advance. But definitely a lot earlier than my Broken Skull Sessions review. That went up during Raw last week because it took me 2 hours to get through it, then took me about an hour to review it, and then even longer to upload it and process the video and all that other shit. So again, I apologize for that, but that already got thousands of views, so I appreciate that. None of my videos do even remotely close to that, so anyone who checked out my Broken Skull Sessions review, I appreciate you, I thank you. But this is the 24 on Trish Stratus. Very good documentary, and in going back in my notes, as I was writing down the notes for this special, I noticed that the last 24 special we got prior to this one was actually the Kofi Kingston one, which aired over SummerSlam weekend 3.5 months ago. We usually get around 3 to 4 to 5 24 specials a year. This year we got an exceptional amount. We got more than usual. I know we haven't had one since August, but since the start of the year, we've had a ton of them. So we had this one on Trish, which would be one. We had the Kofi Kingston one back in August over SummerSlam weekend. So Trish, Kofi is 2. We had the Batista one in July. That was number 3. We had the Ronda Rousey one in June. That's 4. We had the Becky Lynch one in May, which was 5. So we've had almost one every single month throughout the summer. We had one in May, June, July, and August, and not another one until now. But that's 5 right there. We had the WrestleMania one in January on New Orleans. And then the one before that was the Broken Hardy one, the Woken Hardys, the Hardy Boys, whatever, which was amazing back in June of last year. So this year alone, we've had 6 24 specials, probably more this year than any other year so far, which is cool because these specials are great. I just feel like we haven't seen one in a while, and we haven't because it's been 3 or 4 months. But this was really good. This focused on Trish Stratus' return to the ring at the SummerSlam event, of course. And not only that, but also her upbringing in the business, how she got into the business, her retirement back in 2006. And a lot of stuff I did not already know, so I thought this was really, really good. Not as long as the other ones. This one was around 45 minutes, so not terribly long, but I thought it was a perfectly good length for what it was. So we kick off the special. We hear from Trish, who says that a lot of people are expecting a lot out of her SummerSlam match coming up with Charlotte Flair. I mean, of course, Trish herself, a former 7-time women's champion in WWE. Charlotte Flair, now, as of this recording, a 10-time women's champion in WWE. Not counting her reign in NXT either. So with that, it's 11. And then with Trish's hardcore title reign from God knows what year, 2000, 2001, she's an 8-time champion, I believe, in WWE. But still, this is a dream match. We don't really get many dream matches in WWE anymore. I'm not even sure if this was a real dream match, but it was the closest possible dream match we could get with the women in 2019. And it kind of came out of nowhere. The build started on an episode of SmackDown in July, so a month before the event. But it came together quite quickly, and people were looking forward to it. I know I was looking forward to it, and we'll get to this later, but I thought the match delivered big time. So we see Trish at home 2 days before SummerSlam, and you're probably thinking, would they have not already shipped her out to where SummerSlam is? Well, of course, she lives in Toronto. SummerSlam is in Toronto, so she probably got to sleep at home for the better part of the weekend, which is pretty freaking cool. I guess it's part of the benefit of having the one of those big pay-per-view weekends in your hometown, that you don't have to leave home until like the day or two before the pay-per-view. She probably stayed at the hotel on Saturday or Sunday, if not both. But on Friday, she was still at home, which was cool. She talked about how being a mom and mom duty is always number one. over wrestling and stuff like that. But she's had the difficulty of juggling those two lives, being a mom and training for this upcoming match. And it's been tough, but worth it. She talked about how she was born and raised in Toronto, and she currently lives 20 minutes away from where she was born, actually. This I did not know. She talked about how she grew up wanting to be a doctor. So her original dream was to become a doctor. And then she was on her way to med school. She had this whole plan lined up for herself until the university that she wanted to attend, or the university that she was at, I don't remember exactly which, had a strike. And it didn't look too great for the med school at that point. So those dreams kind of went up in flames. Nothing because of what she did, but because of, existing circumstances with the school. She couldn't go there for med school. So she had to kind of find a different dream. So she took a job at a gym because, she could train for free in that case. So that's why she did it. And while she was there, she entered the fitness modeling world. And while there, she talked about all the steps that she went through to get there and how she went for a test shoot, met Robert Kennedy, who I guess is a big name in that world. We got footage of a Robert Kennedy interview talking about Trish from 2003 and how he gave her a chance and he immediately took a liking to her, and how her first photo shoot for them became her first cover, and she was on multiple covers after that. So as a result, she became a fitness model full-time. And she was also a regular around that time on the Michael Landsberg show, Off the Record with Michael Landsberg. And that's exactly who I was thinking of in my review of the Broken Skull Sessions video from that special from a week ago. And thank you to the commenter who left a comment on that video correcting me, because I had mentioned that Taker had brought up many times about, I don't want to become a parody of myself on, I couldn't remember this show. I knew it was like an ESPN-like show, like a sports talk show. It was Michael Landsberg. So she was actually a regular on that show, which is something I did not know. Because she could talk sports. She knew wrestling, and they would have wrestlers on, and she can kind of communicate with them and talk wrestling. So she was a regular on that show for a while, and she has that show to thank, because it was around that time she was doing a talk show. And she had more exposure because of the Michael Landsberg show. But she was on a talk show, not that one, promoting one of her fitness covers, and she was asked about potentially doing wrestling because she would have wrestlers on the show. And she said, yeah, I would definitely entertain the idea, and that was in December of 1998. So as a result of that, she got approached by Michael P.S. Hayes, who was doing some like Slam Jam show or something at the time, and about coming into the company. So she sent them a tape, and all the while she started training at a gym, the same gym that Edge trained at actually, and Christian, Ron Hutchinson, to become a wrestler over in Canada, which is pretty cool. And she wanted to prove to the boys that she belonged, not only to herself, not only to the rest of the world, but really just the guys, that she belonged in that wrestling world. So during this process, after getting the tape sent to WWE and whatnot, Trish got a call by Jim Ross, who offered her a contract to come on in. And he had heard from Ron Hutchinson, who obviously, like I said, trained Edge and trained Christian and a few other notable names. I believe maybe Rhino, I want to say, and maybe just Joe. It was a random name, I know, but I remember that because I interviewed him about 5 years ago, and he talked about his relationship with Edge and Christian and those guys. But he found out from Ron Hutchinson that she had never missed a practice. So out of that, she got a contract offer, and it took a while to kind of be finalized for that to materialize, because she had to get a visa and all that other stuff. And she would talk about that later on. But before we get to the next step in this documentary, we kind of fast forward to present day, where she talks about how she had not been in the ring since October of 2018. Prior to SummerSlam weekend, she had not wrestled or trained or anything until had not trained since October of 2018, the time of the Evolution pay-per-view. And she talked about how she was in the Evolution match, that tag team match with Lita, and the Royal Rumble match. But they weren't really matches for her. They were more of just spots where the spotlight wasn't entirely on her. She would come in, do a few moves, and have that be it. And then, whatever. The tag team match, she didn't really have to do all the work, and the Rumble even less so. She would really just kind of go in there, hit a few signature spots, have that be it, and then she would be on her merry way. This is a real match. And she talked about how there was a 10-year difference from Charlotte Flair. Had she been in her prime, this would be no sweat. It would be no problem. But because she's not really in her athletic prime anymore, she's 10 years older than Charlotte, and she has not really been in the ring. She hasn't been a full-time active competitor since September of 2006. Yeah, it's kind of a challenge, And she said, though, my entire life, though, I've thrived on challenges. And she's looking forward to the challenge of facing Flair at SummerSlam. So back to how she broke into WWE. She signed officially in 1999, but she got her visa in 2000, and they were trying to come up with ideas for what to do with her. So she got put with Test, she got put with Albert, and she debuted on an episode of Heat in March of 2000, right before WrestleMania 2000, actually. She debuted as their manager, as the manager of TNA. TNA. Tits and Outs is actually Test and Albert. What a play on words there. And Test talked, well, not Test, I'm sorry, he's actually since passed away. Albert, Matt Bloom, talked about how Trish at first wasn't all that comfortable with being an on-air performer, the managing thing, the talking thing, the wrestling thing. But she progressed really, really quickly. He said there was a big difference between Trish of 3 months in and that of Trish in, when she was 8 months in. There was a big difference, and she got better really, really quick. And she talked about how valeting was an invaluable tool, being the manager for Test, being the manager for Albert, and kind of watching from ringside. She had the best seat in the house. She had a front row seat to just sit there and watch and learn everything from the best of the best. And around that time, she was kind of frustrated also, not just being a valet, but because she was kind of relegated to doing just photo shoots, which is what she was good at, of course, but she also wanted to wrestle. So she had the occasional match, she had the occasional cat fight, which was dumb, and she had to do some matches that she didn't really agree with back during that time period, like the bras and panties matches. She didn't outright say that, but she's thinking it. Talking about how, this was shit I didn't really want to do back in the day, but here we are, this is something I have to do because that's going to get me to my next point of my career, But she also talked about, kind of fast forwarding again to SummerSlam weekend here. The more media she did in the hype and the build-up to this match with Charlotte at SummerSlam, the more she realized that this was the perfect finale for her career. Being in Toronto really brought more fire to it because she was in her hometown. So we'll get back to that a little later on. And we kind of go back to, again, 2000, 2001 here. So there really wasn't much for the women to fight for in 2001 because Chyna had left the company, I think, as the women's champion in 2001, right after WrestleMania 17. So there was no title to fight for. I think they just vacated it altogether and didn't really bring it back until Survivor Series 2001. And in that match, they put in 6 women who kind of knew how to work to crown a new champion, and Trish won it. She had the least amount of experience of the 6, but she thought it was a cool opportunity, and she really saw that as her opportunity to show them, not just the women, but the entire company, the fans, that she deserved to be champion. And then we see footage of her training with Fit Finlay, who has been one of the biggest supporters of women's wrestling in recent years in WWE. I'm not sure if it was like his choice, but he got placed with the women early on, even before he debuted as an on-air character in the company in 2005, I want to say. He was actually there as a trainer well before that after WCW closed, working with the women and getting them better. Trish, kind of more so than anyone else, aside from probably Lita, was really passionate about pro wrestling, and she was adamant about getting better. She really wanted to improve, and she did. And we hear from Christian and a few other people about how she was always determined to get better, and she had aspirations of being the best. Natalya talked about how she kind of looked up to her, watching her on TV because she was, from Canada. She was blonde, she was strong, she was fierce, she was really, really good, and she was hooked on Trish Stratus, and that's really, I'm sure aside from, the business being in Natalya's blood, that was also a big part of her breaking into WWE and knowing that she had a shot at success because of the success that Trish had many years earlier. Trish also said, this is an exact quote, "There's no reason we can't change the perception of what the women can do in the ring." And around that time, again, around 2001, 2002, the women weren't really getting many opportunities. Of course, there was the iconic Trish-Lita feud. But aside from that, though, there really wasn't many opportunities for the women to go out there and have great matches. By late 2002, I would say, largely thanks to Trish, they had that chance to do that. I remember the Trish and Victoria match at 2002 Survivor Series show, actually a year removed from Trish's first title win in WWE. That being a really good match for what that was. And she was kind of at the forefront of that change in the women's division, well before the women's evolution and the Divas Revolution and all that other, not propaganda, but like that nonsense, all that bullshit about like all the hashtags. And yeah, the women are making great strides now, which is awesome to see, but Trish wasn't really getting the credit that she deserves for doing that long before anyone else in the early 2000s. So anyway, they talked about how the turning point in her career and the women's evolution for her early on was when she and Lita found out they were going to main event an episode of Raw in 2004. They were having this great feud, a lot of good matches, and they were finally given the ball to run with in the main event of Raw in 2004. So real quickly, a bit of a side note, not that this is really all that important, but they do show the board where they show Trish and Lita main eventing Raw. And this wasn't something they made up now and they whatever, because before Trish and Lita, I have never seen the episode of Raw where they main evented. I'm sure I've seen the match before, but never the actual show. Probably, at least not yet. At least I don't think so. But anyway, they show the rundown of the matches that night, and the match that preceded Trish and Lita in the main event was a tag team match. I want to say Triple H and Batista versus Randy Orton and Chris Benoit. Now I know that because they show his name on the rundown. And you're probably thinking, what does that really have to do with anything? And it doesn't really have to do with anything. I just thought it was interesting because in recent years, really as far back as even maybe 10 years ago, because the Benoit tragedy happened a dozen years ago at this point, for the last dozen or so years, they've been making every effort possible to erase Chris Benoit from WWE history. Not to say that they shouldn't, because they absolutely should, to a certain extent because he is a fucking murderer, and I could see why they wouldn't want to draw any attention to what he did. I know that doesn't really have to do a lot with his wrestling career. That's a whole other discussion. That's a whole other discussion for another day. I understand that. But usually in stuff like this, they would either blur out his name or his face, or if they said his name on TV. They may have in one, countdown special years ago. They didn't here. They could have very well blurred out his name from the special. Maybe they didn't catch it the first time. It's pretty obvious. But you see his name in the rundown and they could have very easily blurred that out or cropped it out or whatever, but they didn't. You see Chris Benoit's name on the screen for a solid 3 or 4 seconds, and I'm like, probably more than that. I was like, that's interesting. But anyway, back to the documentary, back to what's important here. Charlotte actually sat ringside for that match, which I didn't know because I've seen photos and videos of that before. They took this great picture of Lita doing her signature, her patented moonsault off the top rope to Trish, and you actually see Charlotte's face in the front row watching the match, which was pretty crazy. Lita talked about how the match was magical for the both of them, and then they were off to the races after that. The women's division really took off after that match in 2004. They were given more opportunities to have the matches they were capable of. They were given more storyline opportunities. That's when we got the Mickey, and that was when we kind of got the Trish and Mickey feud in early 2006, late 2005. And we see clips of that, but we don't really get any explanation. Not explanation, but any in-depth discussion about that feud, which would have been great on this doc because that Mickey-Trish feud was a big part of Trish's career and Mickey's career, really what put her on the map back in 2005, 2006. So I was a bit disappointed they didn't kind of go into more detail about that, but I understand it's only an hour-long doc, 45 minutes, so they got to cut some stuff out, I get it. But Mickie James talked about how Trish Stratus in that feud with Lita, the Trish-Lita feud, really brought back legitimacy to that women's championship that wasn't there before, and if it was, not in many, many years. So we see Trish again, modern day. She gets emotional talking about her kids and how she's going to be away from them as she goes to SummerSlam. Granted, she's only 20 minutes away. She's in Toronto, but they're old enough now where they don't really know what's going on. They're still relatively young. I think her firstborn, Max, which she'll talk about a little later on, was born in 2013, so he's probably about 5 or 6 now, but they still have no idea what's going on because they've never really seen Mom compete before prior to this point. So anyway, back to 2006 here. Trish talks about how her mom got diagnosed with Hodgkinson, I think is how you pronounce it, lymphoma. And she talked to Vince about not renewing her contract because she knew that being on the road, if anything happened to her mom and whatever, that she wouldn't be there to take care of her because she was always on the road. So she felt it was time to kind of wrap up that chapter of her career. And Vince was very, very understanding, I believe, from what Trish said here. He was like, yeah, that's fine, I get it. But if I have only one request, he goes, if I only have one request, can you please stick around for a few more months? And she asked why. He goes, because I think it would be great if you could have your retirement match in Toronto. We'll be there for the Unforgiven pay-per-view. If you stick around till then, we'll give you one last match, and then you can ride off into the sunset from there. And she goes, yeah, that'd be great. So she won the title one more time from Lita at that pay-per-view in front of her hometown crowd. Amazing moment. Natalya called it the closing of a chapter, not only in the career of Trish Stratus, but also with the women's division in WWE. Because quite honestly, after Trish left and Lita was gone 2 months after that, if you could believe that, Lita did not get as grand of a farewell as Trish did because of all the circumstances surrounding her farewell and the Edge stuff, and people were calling her a slut and whatever else. So she kind of had to go out in a different way. But she was gone too by November. By Survivor Series, Lita and Trish were gone. So the women's division, they had Beth coming in, and Victoria was still there, and I think Tori Wilson was still there. Mickie James was kind of the star of the women's division at that point. Melina was starting to wrestle more. They had a good core group of talent, but it was not the same after Trish and Lita were gone. So it was a while before the women's division started to be taken serious again by the powers that be, because Trish and Lita were no longer there, and they had to kind of build up new talent in their absence. So Trish talked about how after she left WWE, she got into yoga. She got into yoga after she retired. She opened up her own studio, and she brought it all over the world. So she kind of had a similar schedule to what she had in WWE. I'm sure her mom got better after she left, so that was when she got back into business, not the wrestling business, but the yoga business, and she promoted it all over the world, really successful. She did shows, she did a movie. She had a lot of opportunities to do a lot of cool stuff outside of WWE. And she got back in the ring a few more times to kind of dip her toes into the water of wrestling and see what was there for her and whether she still had it or not. That included matches in 2008, maybe a match in 2009. I know she hosted Raw in 2009. I don't know if she wrestled on that show. I feel like she did. I know she did in 2008. She wrestled on an episode of Raw like in December of 2008, about 11 years ago at this point. Maybe once more in 2009. Not again until 2011, which was kind of a dumb run for her when she had that WrestleMania 27 run, and it was kind of lackluster because all the focus was on Snooki and LayCool and John Morrison and Dolph Ziggler and Vicky Guerrero even. Trish Stratus was there kind of as a background player, and it was done in part to promote Tough Enough, which she was a host on around that point. But it wasn't the grand farewell that she deserved. It wasn't the farewell that she got 5 years earlier in 2006. So anyway, she talked about how she wanted to have a baby, but her body wasn't really allowing her to have a baby because of the schedule that she was on as a businesswoman and as a wrestler. It wasn't really cooperating to what she wanted to do, and that was have a baby with her husband. She finally announced that she was going to have her first baby, that she was pregnant with her first child at the 2013 Hall of Fame ceremony when she was enshrined into the Hall of Fame by Lita. It was then that she announced that she was having her first baby, Max, who she named Max, or her first baby. She was having her first baby named Max. So she announced it there at the Hall of Fame, and it was around that time, and being a mom and being a businesswoman, she kept up with the product, and she watched the product kind of have a shift with the women's wrestling and the women's evolution and whatever else was going on around that time. So she craved for that one last match. And, she was in the Rumble and she was in the tag team match at Evolution, but it wasn't a singles match. And that's what she really, really craved. Not really having the spotlight on her specifically, but having that adrenaline rush of one more singles match in her career. So she was asked by WWE to do an autograph signing, either in Toronto around SummerSlam weekend or during SummerSlam weekend to promote SummerSlam. And it was there she kind of got the idea, hey, what if I came back for one more match to kind of really close this chapter of my life in wrestling? And she said that Vince, when he got the call, maybe not from Trish, but he got word that she wanted to do one more match in her hometown at SummerSlam against Charlotte, he fell out of his chair, Trish said, which was kind of funny, because she had the idea of facing Charlotte in her hometown at SummerSlam. And it's not like Charlotte was really doing anything of note at that point. She had just lost the SmackDown Women's Championship in May to Bayley. She had lost it to Becky at WrestleMania, won it back for a minute or two before Bayley cashed in. She wasn't really doing a lot. She was kind of off TV for the better part of June and July. So it made sense for her to come back and face Charlotte at SummerSlam. Or rather, for her to face Trish, the returning Trish Stratus at SummerSlam, I should say. So it made sense. And I guess based off how Trish kind of worded it, it was her idea and not WWE's. Usually it's WWE being the ones like, hey, can you come on in for one more match, pal? Like that type of thing, like we saw with The Undertaker in his review, in my review of his interview from last week, where Vince is always calling him to do favors and to do this show, to do that show, and all this other nonsense. Trish, I guess, didn't really have that. It was her idea to come out of retirement for this match, which was kind of cool. And she felt a lot of pressure. She felt a lot of pressure going into the match because she's kind of the OG of the women's division. Not the OG, that would probably be Mae Young or Fabulous Moolah, who have since passed on. But Trish Stratus, in terms of the last real big name to come out of the WWE that was a female in the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, they've had a lot of successful women like Charlotte and Sasha and AJ Lee even, and a few others, Mickie James. But no one has been quite on the level of Trish Stratus. Let's just face facts here. So she has to go out there and deliver. She wasn't really sure if she could deliver. She trained for this moment. She was looking forward to this moment. But the closer it came, and the more people were telling her in interviews and stuff like that, with the media and whatever, that she wasn't in her prime anymore and that Charlotte is, it really kind of dawned on her, like, holy shit, what am I getting myself into? Now, she started the question coming back in the first place. But she had the match, and I can say with full certainty here, it was a great match and probably the best on the entire show. There were some really good matches on that show, but I thought Trish and Lita probably stole the show with their match. It was everything it needed to be, exactly what it needed to be, and even more than that. The crowd was into it. Charlotte was great. Trish was great. The story was strong. The in-ring action was excellent. You had a few near falls there where you may have thought, hey, she may pull this one out. She may finally go off on a high note the same way that she did 13 years earlier, also in Toronto. She won a championship in her farewell match. Will she do the same here? Now, no championships were on the line, but it was a very real possibility for Trish Stratus to ride off into the sunset as a victor. But she didn't. She lost. Flair won. It was a really, really good match. And she talked about how she, walked through the curtain after it was over, and we see her hugging all the women backstage and Vince McMahon and everyone else. She talked about how she'll never forget that reaction from the crowd during the match, after the match, the thank you Trish chants, and she'll never forget that bow that she gave the crowd on the way out, the same bow that she gave 13 years earlier in her previous retirement match in 2006. And she talked about how she was very happy with how it ended, as she should have been, because it was a great final ending to her career, and it was something that she will never, ever forget. We also hear from Bayley and all the other women who call her one of the best to ever do it, and then she'll be remembered for her legacy as one of the best to ever step in the squared circle. We hear from Bayley and all the other women of today and of yesteryear, like Mickie James, like Lita, and all the other women of today, who call her one of the greatest of all time for the women, and they are absolutely right. She is an absolute icon in WWE's history and forever will be. And she says, I'm surprised she didn't make a pun here, and maybe she did and I missed it, but Trish said, I'm 100% satisfied. And I thought she would say stratisfied, like, oh, what a play on words, but she didn't. She just said she was 100% satisfied as far as I could hear. And then she also said that to close it out, she says, the last thing we hear her say is, I put my mind towards something and I did it. I really did it. And you could tell she was really happy with how she, performed in that match and how she really closed out her career on the highest note possible. And not a lot of people can say that. And they illustrate that. They drive that home many times during this special. That there's a lot of people who don't really get to pick their last match. They don't really get to go off on a high note the same way that Trish did. Now, granted, Edge had to retire as the World Heavyweight Champion, last match being at WrestleMania. And, he kind of retired on top, but at the same time, he was forced to retire. It's not like he had that option of leaving as the World Heavyweight Champion. That was really more a matter of circumstance. So she was really happy that she got to go off on a high note as the Women's Champion and really kind of go off and ride off into the sunset in as grand of a fashion as possible. And that was it. That was the 24 special on Trish Stratus. I thought this was great. I really enjoyed this. I missed these 24 specials, and granted, it's only been 3 months. We had none for like a 6-month period from the Hardy Boys one in June of 2018 up until like January of this year. So I'm not surprised. But I thought this was really, really good. Well worth checking out. They cover a lot more than just their comeback match, which is I kind of thought this would be. I thought this would be more of a chronicle on how she was feeling going up to the match. And we heard a lot of great quotes from her and all the other women about how she was performing, how she was feeling going into that Charlotte Flair match, and from Charlotte herself. But it was also cool to kind of get her entire background story, which I did not know. This was probably common knowledge by now, but I didn't know that she wanted to go to med school originally. I didn't know that was how she got hired by WWE. I didn't know that's why she retired from WWE in the first place. I didn't know that her mom was diagnosed with cancer, and that was why she had to retire. Again, she talked about it in her Hall of Fame speech years ago. I just don't remember that. So I thought this was a really good documentary. Great stuff from Trish and all the other women and all the other guys that contributed, like Edge. I don't think Edge was interviewed for this, but Christian definitely was, which was cool. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the special. Be sure to check it out right now on the WWE Network. And I think we have more new network content on the way. I saw somewhere that a new WWE Day Of is premiering, I think this week, this Sunday, focusing on Survivor Series Sunday from last weekend. And then beyond that, I'm not really sure what else is coming on down the pike for the network in the remainder of the year. Probably not much. We had a ton in the last week and a half alone, from new ride-alongs, new Table for Threes, new Broken Skull Sessions, Chronicle, WWE Day Of, a lot of shit going up in the last couple weeks. I don't know if anything new is airing tonight after Raw. I don't think so. And if not, I'll probably put up some miscellaneous content here on the channel for Tuesday. Other than that, though, guys, thank you as always for checking out my review of this episode of WWE 24, focusing on Trish Stratus and all my other new WWE Network and Chill content. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll be back again probably, maybe not tomorrow, but Friday. Unless something new airs tonight after Raw, which I'm not aware of, but probably not as far as I know. I think they're just replaying the Trish Stratus documentary. I think the new Network and Chill video, the next new Network and Chill video, will be up on Friday, reviewing episode 9 of Season 8 of Total Divas, airing tomorrow on the E! Network. So until then, guys, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the month of December. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.